My name is Matthew Koleski. I'm the President and Chief Compliance Officer at Arbor Capital, and we are the parent to Arbor Digital.
My name is Mark Nichols. I'm the Product Director at Arbor Digital, and I come from the traditional financial world, and I've jumped into this crazy crypto world with our full-service product at Arbor Digital. Well, what brought me to Texas was a job opportunity. I came from the East Coast, New York, New Jersey markets, where I traditionally ran an advisory business at a couple big firms. Took a consulting role and then was traveling around the country with other advisors and coaching them up and making sure that they were taking the most advanced approach to delivering wealth management to the people that entrusted them with their financial lives. And I decided to change the pace up a little bit from the hustle and bustle of New York to the keep it weird of Austin, Texas. And so that's kind of how we ended up here.
Yeah, we had a pit stop too in the UK. So I'm originally from Alaska, and then actually followed my wife's career to England for 6 years, and then from there we moved down to Houston, and then she's since left the company, and we've decided now to stay in Texas. Our youngest kid just graduated high school, so we're empty nesters, but and we're finding a lot of opportunity here in Texas with some of the advisors that we're meeting. I worked for Charles Schwab back in 2000 in the Anchorage, Alaska branch, and then went to Arbor in 2004, so Arbor Capital. Stayed in Alaska for about 10 years. I worked the front counter at Schwab, just opening accounts and taking deposits. And literally at the time, we had a line of people out the door. And then we stayed till 8 o'clock just opening up accounts. That was it. So I was like, okay, I'm in the industry, I love it. And then I got licensed, and then a few years later, I left Schwab and went to Arbor, which is an Alaska-based RIA. And over the years then just kind of worked my way up and became one of the principals in 2012, 2013. And then what led us to launch Arbor Digital was a few years later, we're looking around at different asset classes, and I personally had experienced Bitcoin, going back to 2011, 2012, and we're like, how do we get this for our clients? How do we get exposure to this new asset class? And so that led us to explore in our alternative sleeve, let's add Bitcoin, let's add GBTC, and we did that, and so that was kind of the genesis for Arbor Digital, because then we said, how do we go beyond just Bitcoin, right? How do we go into Ethereum and some of these other protocols? And so we said, you know what? Let's go build it. And so we looked at different ways to get our clients exposure, and that's what led to the launch of Arbor Digital. Going back probably 2011, 2012, I was kind of curious. My background is in monetary policy and macroeconomics, which we're seeing that play out right now in the banking sector. But when I first heard about Bitcoin, I was like, this is interesting, right? It's a non-sovereign form of money and lives natively on the internet. That's pretty cool, and I think that's the future. And so I started investing back then. I was mining it on my home computer back when you could. I was in an online group, and then invested assets into Mt. Gox, which then subsequently collapsed in 2014. So I was like, okay. And now I understand what it's like to lose some assets in this. And there's a whole, not your keys, not your crypto, which that's a whole nother discussion. But that was the journey. I'm like, there's something here, right? And not just from a technology standpoint, but from money and what it means for people. Like I said, what we're seeing with all the banks right now, and the feds, who knows what they're going to keep doing. We've been printing money for a long time, and so there's people that are thinking that, right, this is a way for people to preserve value, aside from just throw it into a bank account. The monetary policy, when you think about it from a central banking perspective, there's a massive difference, right? Because central bankers, they want to promote their own currency, whether that's the dollar or the euro or the Chinese yuan or whatever. And we'll talk about Bitcoin specifically, it's there's a fixed supply. It's known. You can't play politics with it. You can't monkey around with it. It's it is what it is. It's cryptographically secure. It's finite. And if we think about what money is, that's more, I think, and what we're seeing now is that's going to become more appealing to people. Plus, it lives natively online. You want to move it around, it's easy. You don't have to wire funds and do all this other stuff and jump all these hoops. 24/7, 365 online. Like that's pretty powerful.
My role as product director is to make sure we build something that people want to use and people get value from. I live to be of service. That's really how I got into financial services. It's what I enjoy about it. It's what I get energy from. And so when I met Matt through a common connection professionally, heard about what they were doing, I had this broad skill set of being in leadership, but then also understanding how to deliver products to financial advisors and how to get them to adopt the products. So just when I heard that they were building this investment solution for their own clients, I saw it and I knew what a struggle it is for just traditional financial advisors to adopt new practices in their everyday. And let alone you have this new thing, this new asset class that's emerging, that's going to impact them, their business, and then also their client relationships. Because Coinbase has over 100 million accounts. Investors are engaging with it, whether they like it or not. And so there's a need for a product like what we have at Arbor Digital to help them bring this to their clients in the safest and secure way that we can. And so for me, that's my role. My role is to make sure that we build something for these advisors that they can adopt easily or easy enough and get a lot of value from it and really propel the advisors and help them integrate a digital asset strategy, both from their client relationships, but then also now what we're seeing from a business perspective. I would like to say I'm probably the chief people officer of Arbor Digital. I'm kind of been tasked with making sure we're doing those things. And I would say for me personally, before I got into financial services, my first life was as a professional tennis player and coach. So I think for me, I tend to go back to those comfort areas to make sure I get those releases. So athletics are hugely important. I'm a big basketball player as well. I've learned my brain needs a lot of activity though still, so I like to meditate, like to reflect a lot, just sit in silence now is kind of how I release a lot of that. But that's for me. I don't know. What about you, Matt?
Hanging with the family, traveling, playing soccer. I'm also a referee, so I love refereeing and coaching. So that's a huge passion in our family. Yeah, and that's a good release. It's really important to kind of, it's 24/7, 365. But yeah, so you got to take a break and unplug every now and then and go do something that kind of resets the brain. I'd say over the last year, we've learned that narratives matter. And what I mean by that is like everything that happened in 2022 from the digital asset perspective, or what's being attributed to the digital assets, really isn't real, right? I mean, you had these companies and firms lever up and blow up. That has nothing to do with blockchain technology, right? We're talking about SBF and FTX and all this other stuff, and these Alameda and Three Arrows Capital. It's like, that's just the same old human nature. Let's go start a fund, start an exchange, borrow a bunch of money, lever up. In some cases, they're stealing client funds, and they just blow up. That is not digital assets. That's not Bitcoin. That's not Ethereum.
Yep.
And so I've learned like narratives matter. And so part of it is like telling the story of what is happening. And we were just talking about that on the way here. It's like, I think people are seeing what's going on in the banking crisis with this latest iteration of the banking crisis and starting to get, oh, yeah, this is really just kind of how much money they want to print, it's an arbitrary number. People are going to start waking up and saying, hey, there's something real here to these digital assets. And so that's kind of the first thing. Then 3 years and 5 years, I kind of view kind of very similar, because it's like people are still getting used to that. 3 and 5 years ago, like there was nobody in this space really from the advisor perspective. And so people would kind of watch things go in, the ICO boom from 2017, 2018, but they were just more paying attention. They weren't really engaged at a deep level. And I think that is what we're finally starting to see now. Like literally, like we see this price action we were just talking about earlier. Like people are like, oh, Bitcoin is 16, now it's at 28. Oh, now I need to get back in. Okay, yep. We were telling you to do that, 3 months ago, but.
Yeah, there's definitely been the dark times, but what I think is really important is how we deal with those dark times. And I would say it's all about process for us. So regardless of whether we're in good times or bad times, it's about sticking with the process and defining it, staying disciplined as well to that process. But it's a struggle, and that's where having good partners to work with that that are not just here for the price action moving up. Like, we're actually here to serve and deliver value over the long term. Like, we're building for the long term here. This isn't a bandwagon play for us. We like to say that we started developing, or I should say, you and Arbor started developing this early in 2015, 2016. So this isn't something we're looking to exit anytime soon. And this is the long game for us. And it is really hard going through those times, and that's where you have to have a lot of open communication. You have to be willing to have hard conversations and say hard things, and I think that's where we've built a really good team. And it's not just Matt and I. We have a team around us, and we have partners such as DFD who help hold us accountable, especially in those times. And they're also the ones, and we're also the ones who together get ourselves through those hard times and make sure we don't lose focus on why we got into this in the first place.
We serve the other financial advisors that want to get into this asset class on behalf of their clients, the ones that are curious and the ones that see the value here. And part of our job is to help educate them and move them along. We think this is the future, right? We think eventually more assets are going to be moving on chain, but in terms of who we serve, it's the other advisors that want to engage with us and want to engage on behalf of their clients into this asset class.
There's a monumental shift happening with how the next generations want to receive financial services, how they want to consume financial services. And I think what has gotten financial services to the success that it has as an industry in the past is not what will propel it to the next level of success for the next generations. And I think digital assets or crypto is a representation of that shift. And so I think it's going to be foundational to have an understanding of this asset class, because I think especially when they're more technology driven and native, they're going to have more of a knowledge base. And if they come in and are more knowledgeable than you, how are you going to develop that trust? Because no matter what, as much as we use technology, human interaction is always going to be at a premium. And so that's where financial advisors are always going to be at the forefront of helping people achieve their goals and matching up their investments with achieving those life goals. And that's where digital assets are going to play a huge piece. It's just part of that fundamental shift. From some of the recent studies, it's at least 56% of all millennial investors have an allocation to crypto or digital assets, either in a 401k, IRA, or a taxable account. That's a large percentage. That's not anecdotal by any means. And then Coinbase, which is the primary way, especially here in the US, that people have gotten into digital assets, they have over, I mentioned earlier, 100 million accounts. And then you look at even Charles Schwab. When you look at millennial investors and younger, the third largest holding of those investors is GBTC, the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. So these investors are going to invest whether the advisors like it or not. The idea is, are you going to be the one that shepherds them safely and securely to engage with this ecosystem? You risk your relationships by not having a solution, and especially if you actively ignore it, you're then alienating your next generation of consumers, or the next generation of people who are going to want to consume what you have to bring, all the value and all the intelligence that you have to bring value to someone's life. You're going to alienate them just by not having a solution or actively going against it. That's the risk you play.
And everybody's been talking about this generational wealth transfer, right? That's going to happen, and it's going to continue to happen. And if you don't have the relationships with the younger folks, like the kids and the grandkids, it's like, because they're, like you point out, they're doing this, they're actively doing this. And if you don't have it, if you're an advisor and you don't have a solution, and your answer's like, well, I don't even really know what that is, or I haven't spent the time to investigate it yet, that's communicating a message that, hey, I'm not interested in this. I'm just going to focus on what's worked for me in the past. And you're really turning the back on not just the future, but the next generation of investors. And that to me is a business risk.
Yeah, I mean, I'm big on the relationship. So really that conversation always starts with discovery. What do you know about this asset class? What excites you about it? What doesn't excite you about it? You need to seek to understand first before you can start engaging with them to have some sort of influence on how they think, how they view. And it's the same thing that advisors that you've done over your entire careers, just in a different package. You've had to do the same thing with stocks or fixed income or alternative investments. Those conversations are very, very similar. And I think there's an element of fear amongst advisors who, well, I don't understand this myself, so how can I go have a conversation? So I think that's the first barrier that we help with, and part of the value we add is we coach you up on those conversations. And it's really just starts with what you already know. Discover, seek to understand, and then before that you also have to prepare and have what is your position. You have to have a position, whether it's good or bad. And the great thing about this asset class is you can build your business either way. If you don't like digital assets or you don't like crypto and you don't think it's the future, you still need to understand it to be able to have that position and to be able to defend it.
One of the big things you said when you came over was what do we need to focus on? Education, right? It's about meeting the advisors, understanding what is their current perspective or understanding of the asset class, and then helping them, okay, here's where you are, here's your understanding, here's where we can add value and move you along in that spectrum of understanding. Because like you said, we've had a lot of people just like, I don't know what this is, so I'm kind of curious, and then so we're going to engage with them very differently than people that have, I've already got a Coinbase account, all right, I'm actually doing some staking on my own. Like, there's people that have different levels of understanding. Yeah,
and I guess let's make this real. This is a real client and a real situation we've run into is where they've come to us and they said, I need help. And what triggered that was they did it themselves without truly understanding what they were doing. And they put in way more money, took way more risk than what they thought they were doing. And it wasn't until they lost a large portion of that investment where they took a step back and asked themselves, why did I do this? How did I do this? What was the reasoning of me doing that much? And those are the conversations we're having. We're helping clients get ahead of those things so that way they can avoid the pitfalls that have plagued traditional investors for years and decades and millennia, if you will. So that's what those conversations sound like. It's helping the clients discover themselves what do they want to do and help align with what they want to achieve in their life and what we can do as investment advisors to help them achieve those goals through. And crypto is becoming a part of achieving those goals. From a percentage standpoint, it will range between, we feel, 1 and 10%, and that's based on risk tolerance, your profile as an investor, your behavior, not just your technical investor profile, but also your behavioral. This is a long-term, investment thesis that we have in this asset class. So you want to make sure you're not doing too much and taking on too much risk and becoming misaligned. And so from the data and what we can do, what we can pull from, a lot of the good stuff we have in the traditional world is a lot of the math has already been done in building an optimized portfolio and building optimized investment solutions. So given the metrics that we have in terms of risk and reward, we can actually create a portfolio where you incorporate digital assets that increases the risk return profile and actually makes it a more attractive portfolio and will help you achieve your goals in a more risk adjusted way.
Right, it's about understanding where each client is in their risk perspective, and 1 to 10. I think our average is like 2 to 3 probably, and that's for people that really understand this asset class. And it's I want to say it's really important. Talk about education and risk. It's really important for them to understand the volatility around this asset class. There's never been anything like this in terms of the volatility profile. If you look at the volatility of Bitcoin over the last 10 years, and so getting them to understand that before they are ready to commit dollars from the advisor and even from the end client is really important. So starting there, hey, they got this understanding, but then talking about the exponentiality of returns and the possibility of what this can do, and a lot of times we just use look at technology. Look what technology's done in the last 20 years, right? Yeah. That genie's not going back in the bottle, right? The largest companies in the US now are pretty much all tech, where 10, 20 years ago that wasn't the case. And so we're now at this beginning stages of this new asset class, and talking to people about you should have exposure to this. We feel strongly about it. That's why we're here running the business, right? It's you and your clients should have exposure to this, even if you don't think it's maybe it's not right. A 1% allocation, even if it goes to zero, is not going to blow up their plan. And so that's a message that we're trying to communicate to folks. Get an allocation to this.
Well, and then I think the opportunity there is too is you have the next generation of millionaires and high earners are working and living and breathing in this space. They're, I live in Austin, and UT Austin is a huge community, and it's very tech focused. And I go to events, and there are so many working blockchain, and not private blockchain, I'm talking decentralized blockchain projects and groups that all of these kids are so excited about. And they don't care about the price. They care about building stuff.
Right.
And this next generation of workers, they're already working. They're already developing in this space. They're going overseas. They're going to conferences. They're going to these network hubs, and they're doing that. So we're not only thinking about servicing and getting people onboarded who aren't there to get that 1 to 10%. We're actually also thinking about those people who are 100% allocated. How do we help them achieve their financial goals as well? Because they also need help. And that's a whole new generation of wealth builders that have real wealth, but have no idea how to now diversify into the other things and achieve the goals that they want to do in their lives beyond what they've built in the blockchain.
Another real world example, like we're having literally 20-year-olds that came to us, right? And they've got millions just in crypto and nothing else.
Yep.
So it totally flips that conversation on its head of how do you protect your wealth? How do you diversify your assets? It's the complete opposite. I will say one other thing in terms of the risk, in terms of like the cultural, I think, movement of this is important. When I was in the financial services industry during the tech bubble and saw that play out. But more importantly, like in this industry and seeing the fallout from the financial crisis of 08-09 and the backlash from kind of Main Street against Wall Street, it was palpable and still is. And I think some of the younger people carry that with them. Hey, all these bankers got bailed out and they blew up the economy. And what's happening right now again, right? What are we seeing right now in the last couple of weeks? That is really important for advisors to understand the cultural shift and understanding in the US and how the younger investors view financial services and financial products. And if you are not engaging in this asset class, because it ticks all the boxes, right? It's accessible, it's democratizing, it provides people that were previously shut out from having access to financial services. That's what this offers. And that's powerful.
I think it first starts with being open-minded.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to meet them where they are at. And instead of taking what you've built and what you feel is the right way to do things, to then be able to cross that bridge to their world and to understand how they view it, and to then meet them and then you both can then meet in the middle to then experience a great relationship that what could be. I think that's what needs to happen. That's essentially why we exist, because we want to help traditional financial advisors cross that bridge.
You have to be, like I said, open-minded and understanding, because people are creating wealth in new ways, and we've even seen there's even this sense from the traditional financial industry, to kind of shun or even scoff at that type of new wealth that's being created. That's not going to go very far. So you have to be able to okay, hey, you're great. You did an NFT project that sold, and it's amazing, and you've generated a lot of value. How can we help you diversify that, right? And so instead of being whatever, that's not real. It's as we're seeing, what is real? What is the dollar? What is real with the traditional dollar? But no, you have to be open-minded. You have to be able to engage with the younger generation that's creating wealth in new ways. So we have a lot of discussions with compliance teams, right? People are interested, the advisors are interested, and then they say, okay, now we got to get compliance on board. And so one of the ways we address that is making ourselves available. Plus, we've open sourced a lot of the work that we've already done. And so what's important for advisors is who is a qualified custodian? What are your process around onboarding? What is your process around withdrawals? How do you manage the portfolio? And so we've open sourced a lot of our compliance documents to help people, hey, if you're engaged with us, here's how you should think about rewriting your ADV to include digital assets. And so we've taken some of the heavy lifting for people to get that done. It still comes back to education though, right? They've got to be willing and able to step out into an industry and into an asset class where there may not be clear guidance from the regulators. And so we make that point clear. It's not for everybody yet, but we want to help people to get there and to take that leap by not just understanding why it's important for their clients as a fiduciary, right? I think it's almost wrong to sit back and say I'm a fiduciary, but I'm not even going to bother with it or not even try to understand it. I think that's a risk. But yeah, really open sourcing all the work we've done over the last 5 years and making it available to say, hey, here's how you can help your compliance team. Here's some things to think about. And then if you have additional questions, come and talk to us.
Yeah, and I think that to piggyback on that, it's the quality of work that's been done and the amount of time, energy, and resources that has been put into committees, to talking with legal counsel, and to having all of those resources and those teams behind us. So even though you see our faces here, there are multiple teams, multiple partners from a compliance, from a custody, from a legal standpoint that helped us position ourselves to be able to deliver this to other advisors. And that's where, and then making that just available is just, again, giving value. And that's really the first place where we have to start with a lot of the advisors.
I hate to say it, but one of the catalysts, in my mind, there's two. One of them is price, right? You've seen Bitcoin, which historically in times of crisis has generally correlated with the traditional markets. That's not the case. And I think it was a pretty adamant statement from Bitcoin to say, okay, banks are in crisis, but the price of Bitcoin is rallying while a lot of these banks are failing. And you see the price of regional bank stocks get crushed. The other catalyst is something that we've alluded to already a little bit. It's like people start to question this fractional reserve banking system and the Fed and what their role's been in creating inflation that was, transitory at first and then manifested itself pretty spectacularly, which surprised some people. But for a lot of the folks that have studied Bitcoin and what it's about, they're just sitting there going, this is why it's here. This is why it was created. Literally the first block, right? Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. Like, that's embedded in the culture. It's embedded in the code. And more importantly, it's cryptographically and mathematically just there. And that's what Bitcoin is. You can trust it, right? And I think that's what we talk about this a lot. Like, what can you trust? Can you trust the bank? If you're a company, you got put $1 billion with SVB, or any regional bank, can you trust that now?
I think we natively live on the internet and we're accessible. We have our phones where we take out every single day and we're always accessible. It's the world we live in now. So the trust models of the past are not going to be the trust models of the future. And that's what we see playing out. So as a catalyst, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing these trust models being not only stress tested, but actually broken. And we're seeing that, so what's the solution to that? And what, again, is the value proposition originally of Bitcoin and decentralized blockchain is this non-sovereign, uncontrolled, decentralized store of wealth and this monetary network that will operate 24/7, 365, regardless of what's happening, and no one can stop it. And you're seeing just the value proposition come to the forefront. And it doesn't take a lot. And we're in a position now where you don't need to overextend yourself and put in half of your net worth. Just do little bits at a time. And that's one of the revolutionary things about this asset class as well, is I can do the same allocation from a portfolio and an investment standpoint for every single investor that walks through our door or comes onto our camera. No matter what their wealth situation is, I can give them the same exact allocation and the same exact percentages and the same weightings. And that's revolutionary. And that's something that we feel is really important about this asset class as well, is that we can now service everyone and no one is excluded. And we can build the same portfolio that I'm building for the high net worth business owner or highly successful worker over the last 50 years who has now, millions of dollars, to the same people who maybe don't have that amount of net worth, work just as hard, or maybe even just your beginner investors. I can build them the same exact allocations. I call it the merge. And there's this merging, what you said, of this new decentralized technology and then with the traditional incumbent technology and the players that have been built. That merge is happening, and you need people who are going to understand both worlds. And right now, you either understand one or the other. So why Arbor? Arbor is right in the middle, and we are committed to being in both worlds and understanding them, so that way we can help that connection in the middle happen.
I think our deep personal and professional experience is almost, it's unmatched from a compliance perspective. The work that we've done, and I think we even talked about this the other day, where it's like people don't do the proper due diligence. Big institutions, right? Trusting offshore exchanges because, oh, this guy did it and this person did it, so that's good enough for us, and they didn't do their proper due diligence. So why Arbor? We've got the personal experience, the professional experience, and the compliance background to do this in the most compliant and accessible way possible.
Being of service and helping other advisors, who then in turn can help their investors that trust them with their livelihoods, who want to engage with digital assets or crypto assets, helping them do it in a safe and secure way. That's success for us.
Yeah, and I would say the success and what gives us, what I enjoy is having the stories like one of our clients. They have a solution, right? They have Arbor Digital. They're winning business because of that, right? They're bringing on new clients because they can offer a solution to them. Hey, we'll do the traditional assets, and we have this, really amazing opportunity to invest in digital assets, and not everybody's doing that. And so that gives me, I think that's success. Helping other people succeed is kind of how I define success. I think it's really important. Part of the culture of how we approach this asset class is we really believe in the technology itself, right? And I think this is beyond an asset class. It is transformational technology. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's accessible, it's democratizing, it's giving access for people that were previously shut out of the financial system. And I think that is the most powerful part of this. And so we built a business model to reflect that, right? We've got very low minimums. We work with pretty much anybody that wants to come in and learn about it. We're going to engage with them.
Well, I think for me, it really starts with the dedication that we have. We're dedicated to this space. We'll never claim to be the smartest people in the room, but we're going to be in the 0.01% of the people that live and breathe in this space. And I think if you're going to engage in an asset class that moves at the speed of information over the internet and is live 24/7, 365, you have to be dedicated. You don't want to work with partners who don't live and breathe in this space in that way. And for me, that has to be the fundamental piece to why Arbor.
Yeah, we're all in. I mean, our investment thesis around this hasn't changed and won't change. We built an amazing team. We're small enough, but we can be nimble. We can pivot and go as this rapidly evolving asset class continues to change, right? We're going to be in the forefront of it. And like you said, yeah, we also, we don't claim to be experts, but we are out there, we're collaborating with everybody, and we're always learning, because that's what it takes. If we're going to get stuck in a fixed mindset of what we think it is today, that's going to be irrelevant in 5 months. And so we're committed to always learning, staying in front, and staying engaged in this asset class. I think we're going to see new highs in Bitcoin probably if this really accelerates with the banking meltdown. I would not be surprised at all. The narrative, what's cool about Bitcoin, right, and digital assets, the narrative can shift and they can absorb it, and it can be programmed and almost go into these new things. What's always been there for Bitcoin is this is a reserve asset class. It's digital gold. It can be exchanged online natively 24/7, 365. And as people say and look at the crap that's fallen down around them, like, this has not changed. Every 10 minutes or so, another block gets mined. It's always going to be there. And we talk about trust. You can trust that. You can see it. It's verifiable. So my prediction, I would say if we continue to see this meltdown, that you'll see Bitcoin continue to move higher, and more interest from not just advisors and their clients, but from the general public.
I think its resiliency is being thrown to the forefront, which I think is going to propel Bitcoin to new heights, especially with new regulatory regimes being not just, and that's the thing that we haven't talked about at all, is that the global aspect to this asset class is that we're much more from a US lens, but if we step out of that, we think globally, that Bitcoin's gonna It's going to go up just because from the global aspect of it, regardless of what happens here in the U.S.
The first, I'll just real quick, short story. The first time I really thought about this from a non-U.S. perspective was I was talking to a guy from Argentina. He grew up. He said his mom would pick him up every day from school with a pillowcase full of cash. She got paid every day, and she said, if we don't convert this into food right now, tomorrow won't be worth anything. And I can remember thinking, like, how is that possible? Like, you're getting paid, the value of your labor is getting paid in these notes that tomorrow will be worth nothing, and you have to convert that to food. And so when you talk about the non-US perspective, there are countries and economies that have suffered through massive inflation, and it's really just thieving and taking from people's life savings, their essence of who they are, that they save, and then it just evaporates because some central bankers decide they want to make it worth nothing. That was 2014. I was at a Schwab Impact Conference, and there was a guy speaking, and I said, that's really amazing, and that's super powerful. So it's beyond just what we as Americans might think, but when you take a global perspective, talk about the many different use cases, there's another one, right? People leaving Venezuela and Colombia because they can't do things, and they're going to take their private keys with them and go across the border because they can't actually pull their money out of the country. So there's many, many use cases beyond just what is relevant for folks here in the U.S.
Absolutely. So we have a podcast called The Asset Revolution, a little play on words where it's both a revolutionary and evolutionary podcast about digital assets. You can also find all of our content, our articles. Matt frequently writes articles, as well as we are on Forbes or any other financial services media. You can find us at our website, arbordigital.io, and then all social media platforms. We are primarily on LinkedIn and Twitter, but you can also find us on Facebook and Instagram as well.